So, you want to make a horrific monster for the purpose of scaring the pants off of anyone who watches whatever you're making. You're in luck! Sitting in a room full of hamburger wrappers making up monsters all day is all I do! Regardless of the reason you want to construct a creature for spookin' folks, I decided to make a video about that very topic, which you're watching right now. So let's get into it. If you want to make a monster, the easiest way to make a scary and effective one is to start with what scares you. The best monsters have their inspirations rooted in fears from reality, and chances are, if you're afraid of it, someone else is afraid of it too. It's time to find a person you can relate to and scare the shit out of them. Fun fact, the Quiet Place guy is afraid of deaf people. Common themes in my work you might have noticed are loss of personal autonomy and identity, insects, body horror, and fear of the unknown. This could be as simple as a big freaky bug, or as complicated as the ramifications of the fact that
there might not be life after death and how that means it's just an inky black void of non-consciousness that you and everyone you love will inalienably fall into, sealing your fate in a way that truly embodies the word unalive.
Oh, that's why they say it. To give us an example to go off of, I'm gonna be vulnerable and share one of my fears. I'm afraid that my penis is too big. I'm afraid of parasites. So, our monster will have a basis in the fear of parasites. Now you, leave your greatest fear in the comments below. Both I and the entire internet promise to be responsible with that information. Once you have what scares you, think about why it scares you. The difference between your fear and the monster you can create using it is that your fear is often grounded in reality. Unless it's a phobia, there's likely a good reason why you're afraid of what you're afraid of. Think about that reason. That is the core of your fear. Let's go back to our example. I am afraid of parasites because they want to climb up inside my body, depleted of nutrients, turning me into some sort of husk of my former self. And if they're really bad, they'll irreparably damage my body in a way that makes me look like some sort of body horror freakazoid incapable of caring for myself. I know, I'm a bit of a pussy for being afraid of that. My cowardice aside, understanding why it scares you exposes this spooky thing's underlying fear mechanism, which you can use to crank up the spook a couple notches. For example, a typical parasite would just live inside you and eat your flesh and drink your blood. But a monstrous parasite could live inside you, eat your flesh, drink your blood, and grow to a point that it's literally consuming your entire form from the inside out. Once you have the core of your fear in the palm of your hand, think about some interesting ways you can expand on it. There's many ways you can do this, from Frankensteining it by combining fears that have similar aspects to make them into a hodgepodge monster, to diving in even deeper to the reasons why the fear is scary, to finding a time or place in which the fear was very societally relevant and weaving the aesthetics and values of the culture it terrorized back into its corporeal form. Back with our example, one type of parasite that really scares me is one that affects the host mentally as well as physically. And in this moment, I can see an opportunity to combine fear of parasites with a loss of autonomy. If we are to glance deeper into the parasite horror, we can see that it's actually made up of multiple smaller fears. So, you'd be wise to examine the fear of insects and body horror as well. This is easier said than done, but if you do this effectively, you should be able to take the feeling of why your fear was realistic and scary, and elevate it to a point that it's even scarier by taking the creamy center of the fear and putting it in an unrealistic nightmare scenario. Think about it. John Wayne Gacy was pretty scary when he was dressing up as a clown, butt-fucking, then killing, then butt-fucking those guys in that order. But imagine how scary he would be if he wasn't just dressing up and was a clown in real life. That's why it was as scary as it was. Pun not intended. Now that we have a monster with the creamy center of what makes it scary smeared all over its face, let's think bigger with those ideas. It's time to take those thoughts and turn them into physiology. Take the fears that you've based your monster on, and imagine what they would look like physically. Let's go back to our example. Our monster is an insectoid parasitic monster that controls the minds of the afflicted and then permanently distorts their body. Let's start by combining the insectoid with body horror. A body sucked dry of all its flesh and fat, save for the victim's shrink-wrapped bones. Below the tight skin, the outline of a compressed centipede looks ready to burst, as large as the skeleton itself. Its movements make the epidermis wrinkle and writhe like a trash bag full of freshly injured rats. Every once in a while, the sharp extremities of its limbs pierce the skin. A pockmarked corpse, animated only by the being whose limbs pop through its surface, leaving behind leaking pustules, too infected to heal. The beast has a stranglehold over its host mind, who now lives only to feed and care for the centipede and its eggs. Or something goofy like that. If you've manifested its physical form effectively, you should have an abomination whose pain and hatred makes it the patron saint of your fear in question. If you're proud of the unholy creature you've generated, we can move on to the next step. Now that you have a horrifying bugaboo to scare your victims, ask yourself, where does it live? Where did it come from? If you've been paying attention, you may already know that you would want to base this around your core fears. If your monster centers around religious fears, maybe a church. If your monster is related to medicine and body horror, what about a hospital? If he's a clown, maybe you'll see him at the circus. You don't need to make it that obvious, and if you're going for horror comedy, a juxtaposition would be great here. Think back to killer clowns from outer space. Hilarious! Let's go back to our example. Where would a parasitic centipede that lives inside of a person live? Well, the obvious answer is inside of a person, but I'm talking about before then. No, not Staples. I think that this would be a great opportunity to expand the world we've created by showing very little of a grander piece. What if we make the centipede part of a large underground hive that's collecting these bodies for some heretofore unknown reason? I don't know what that reason is, but two things are for sure. One, your audience will ask that question too, deepening their investment in this world. And two, it doesn't look good. The world you create around your creature will add background to it, the creature and its effects on society. If this is a monster that's meant to commentate on certain aspects of society, you might want to think about putting them in the thick of it. Bonus points if that aspect of society ties into both why the creature exists and why it hunts its victims. Again, easier said than done, but if you can make all those pieces fit together snugly like a puzzle, you will have one tight ship of a story, I tell ya. Now that you have a functioning critter with a world to hunt in and prey to hunt, it's time for the bonus lore. This is gonna be those little extra meat giblets for the super fans who watch YouTube videos of a fat loser who breaks down monsters. I resent that. If you're going for a creature that functions as a part of a larger ecosystem, one of the most important distinctions you can make about your monster is whether it is of a biological or supernatural origin, or some mix of the two. A monster of biological origin is just like any other animal, except a bit more fearsome and undiscovered. A monster of supernatural origin is one that would have a bit more disconnect from the natural world, like only coming into existence after being summoned, or paranormal abilities that it would be impossible for an animal to evolve, or connection to an unforeseen and powerful realm. Anything that would differentiate this monster from something that actually occurs in reality. It's fun to toe the line and make the audience guess whether or not this is a roided up brown bear or an evil underground dark god. You can also do a combination of the two and incorporate aspects of each. Whichever you pick, it will have ramifications for your monster. An intelligent extraterrestrial demon is much scarier than a big dumb snarling animal in theory. But taking inspiration from the terrors of nature while you make your critter could bridge that gap. There is something to be said in that, regardless of which is scarier on paper, the one threatening your life is the one scarier in practice. If you follow this tutorial correctly thus far, you have a monster based on one of your deepest fears, that you've created a physical form, origin, place, and backstory for based on its core. Of course, if you're making a piece of horror media, the monster is only one of the factors that will make it effective. You need to really dive deep on the world that it exists in and the characters it faces. I know you're smart enough to pick this up by now, but maybe you'll want to make those characters have a stance on your core fear. Trust me, if all the flavors work together, it's got the best chance to be a great meal. This tutorial is oriented to help you make the best horror monster, not the best horror movie. If you want a tutorial on how to do that, this video is gonna need to do pretty damn well. So if you like this video for some reason, you should like, comment, and subscribe with all notifications enabled, or I'll infect you with centipede AIDS. I wanna thank Dead Rex for making this dope art. Shout out the Inner Circle, love y'all. Okay, bye!